NATO meets in Madrid. The military alliance formally invites Sweden and Finland to join. Will the expansion give members more security or antagonize an already angry Russia? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the NATO summit. It's been 4 months since Vladimir Putin shocked the world by ordering his troops to attack Ukraine. So with the conflict still raging, this year's NATO summit in Madrid focused on dealing with Moscow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy attended the meeting virtually and warned the military alliance that Moscow's ambitions will not stop at his country.
This is not a war of Russia only against Ukraine. This is a war for the right to dictate conditions in Europe, for what the future world order will be like. That is why it is absolutely necessary to support Ukraine right now with weapons, finance and political sanctions against Russia that will stop its ability to pay for the war.
Moscow has been wary of NATO for some time and warned there would be consequences if Kiev was invited to join the alliance. But while Ukraine has not been invited, Sweden and Finland have. The two Nordic nations have been traditionally neutral, but after Russia's attack, they both decided it was time to change policy. Ankara, though, had some concerns. Both Sweden and Finland host members of the PKK and FETÖ terror groups. But following a trilateral meeting, Turkey's concerns were addressed.
As NATO allies, Finland and Sweden commit to fully support Turkey against threats to its national security. This includes further amending their domestic legislation, cracking down on PKK activities, and entering into an agreement with Turkey on extradition.
So after decades of neutrality, Stockholm and Helsinki have officially been invited to join. Now that will give Russia an additional 1,300-plus kilometer border with NATO and mean the Baltic Sea will be almost entirely surrounded by NATO members.
You have given us lots of support, and that has been important throughout because the process hasn't been easy, both in Sweden and Finland. We have much in common, and now we have even more common when it comes to security policy.
Well, the end of their neutrality not only marks a major shift in European security, it's also a major blow to Vladimir Putin. The Russian president was quick to condemn NATO's decision and warned he would take action if the alliance deployed troops to Finland and Sweden.
If they want to, please go ahead. But they should clearly understand that they didn't face any threats before this. Now, if NATO troops and infrastructure are deployed, we will be compelled to respond in kind and create the same threats for the territories from which threats towards us are created. It's obvious. What don't they understand? Everything was going fine between us, but now there will be tensions. There certainly will. This is obvious and inevitable. I'll repeat, if there is a threat to us.
So does expanding the alliance make NATO's members safer, or is it just provoking the proverbial bear? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Washington, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. He's also a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State who served in Europe and with NATO. From Istanbul is author and political analyst Onur Erim. And from Kiev, Peter Zalmayev is the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, a nonprofit organization aiming to reinforce democratic institutions in post-Soviet countries. Thanks all so much for being with us. Let's begin by setting, I guess, the general tone and asking if it's fair to say that this was actually the most important and impactful NATO summit we've seen in decades. Mark Kimmitt, I'll start with you. Is that fair, or is it an exaggeration?
Well, I think given what we expected the world to look like right now 5 years ago, it certainly is impactful. Obviously, the situation in the world has changed considerably. What's happening on the ground inside Ukraine is significantly different. So this new Madrid summit is focusing on this new reality. It is certainly impactful, but I think more than anything else, it recognizes that this holiday from history we've been taking over the last 10 years since the last summit, the last time the strategic strategy was developed, we now are realizing that we're back to where we were 15 years ago, not where we thought we were going to be 5 years ago.
Interesting. Peter, would you put it that way? Say we've been on a holiday from history and now this NATO summit in Madrid kind of marks a return from that vacation?
Well, indeed, it's not for lack of warning signs along the way. Starting in 2008 with Russia's, takeover of Georgian territory, that led to this, appearance of two splinter states, Abkhazia and South Ossetia there. Then, obviously in 2014, the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war in eastern Ukraine. There have been plenty of signs along the way that there's going to be no business as usual with Russia, that Russia, has other goals in mind, contrary to what it has stated, that it is concerned with NATO's expansion. I don't think it ever really believed that. This has been a cover of its real intentions all along. Vladimir Putin actually made it clear recently when he said that this is about, gathering more lands for Russia in the spirit of Peter the Great. He does not see Ukraine as as having the right to exist as a independent state, and so he will go as far as he can to try to get as much of Ukraine's territory as he can, and to make Ukraine an unviable, non-viable, place to live.
Let me ask Onur then. I mean, according to what Peter's saying, should NATO have held a meeting this kind of hugely important as this Madrid summit was? Should this have been held actually years ago? Had NATO been ignoring signs of Russian aggression or kind of delaying the inevitable by not holding this impact of a summit and considering what is on the table in Madrid?
The current situation that we're in the world, of course, calls for what's going on right now. Could there be a discussion that this could have been done before, seeing somewhat of the future, what's going on with Russia and Putin's policies? Yeah, it could have been, but a lot has happened since then. Let's not forget, just over a year ago, people were discussing, whether or not NATO's brain death has occurred, as put by Macron. And now we're talking about totally different things. Now we're talking about expansion of NATO. It seems it may be well beyond North Atlantic. NATO is essentially set up as a threat from the USSR, today Russia, but now we see the shift is at least equally being distributed, if not more, towards China. And we're also seeing, I think, we all know NATO is pretty much of a military alliance, but now we may see signs of also political and perhaps economical alliance as well. So different times call for different measures. Could this argument have been done, or this meeting could have been done 2 years ago or 5 years ago? Yes, but we were discussing totally different things then. We're discussing totally different things now, and there is no guarantee we're going to be discussing totally different things a year from now.
It is incredible to think that just over a decade ago, there was a lot of talk about, NATO being obsolete entirely. And was it worth continuing with the organization? I mean, some saw it as, a kind of provocateur for Russia that wasn't quite necessary anymore. But wow, look where we are today. Peter, let me come back to you, because the fact that, Finland and Sweden, two traditionally neutral and pacifist countries, are now joining NATO. Russia says, of course, it's not surprised. Go right ahead. But do you think Moscow was really prepared for this kind of momentum building against it?
No, absolutely not. Vladimir Putin thinks in different categories. He has been able to get away with so much, as I just enumerated previously, and he has been able to buy so much of Europe's political and economic establishment through, his pipeline diplomacy, if you will, through lobbyists, through his TV presence, through friendly politicians, that I don't think he ever expected this sort of outcry that resulted, first of all, because he did not expect Ukrainians to resist as fiercely as they have. He clearly expected to take Kiev from, in the period of 3 days to a week. So obviously, this flood of events that ensued was something that took Vladimir Putin by storm. He did not expect what was coming. He clearly did not expect Finland and Sweden to become members of NATO. What you're hearing from the Kremlin right now is sort of trying to, put a positive spin on this. They're still claiming that Ukraine, as a member of NATO, is an existential threat to Russia. But Finland and Sweden are not. It just tells you that Russia is really impotent to do anything against NATO conventionally, other than just continue to saber rattle and threaten some kind of a nuclear response. But conventionally, they stand no chance. It took them weeks to conquer Severodonetsk, a little town in eastern Ukraine. So that just shows you how much of a braggadocio Vladimir Putin has been, and how little you can believe all the messages coming from Russia. The fact of the matter is that Russia has just gotten an extra 800 kilometers of border which is Finland, which is 800 more kilometers of NATO bordering Russia. This is a clear demonstration of the failure of Vladimir Putin's plans.
It's 830 miles, more than 1,300 kilometers of border with NATO, right?
Thank you.
Mark, let me get your thoughts, on kind of Putin's reaction, playing very nonchalant. Oh, no surprise to us that Finland and Sweden are joining now, but beware the consequences. What do you think amounts? Go ahead.
No, I just think that he is playing nonchalant. He does realize there are consequences. His entire Baltic fleet now is at risk because it's surrounded by NATO. Kaliningrad is about the only outlet he has to the sea now. But I don't think he's necessarily too concerned about the two countries, because NATO is strong enough to defeat Russia with or without these two countries. But he is certainly upset at the fact that there is unanimity inside of the entire alliance right now, and has been for some time. But the consequences to him, tactically and militarily, of the two countries joining at this point is not a problem. He has already said, however, that there will be consequences if NATO starts stationing troops inside those two countries. So I think in terms of his overall reaction, let's watch this space.
What kind of consequences could he be talking about? Because you rightly point out that Sweden and Finland joining means that his access to his Baltic fleets could be effectively blocked. So, I mean, are we looking at a sort of handicapped Russian military, but still being in a position to make threats to NATO?
Well, I think threats are cheap, threats are easy. His capability to act on those threats, I think, is severely limited given the amount of destruction and casualties he's taken inside of Ukraine alone. So I don't think that anybody is taking his conventional military threats seriously. He will saber rattle and refer to the fact that he can always use tactical nuclear weapons. But I think at this point, his response that he has made so far is perfunctory. Had he said nothing, he'd look the fool. What he says is what we'd expect from him, nothing more.
What about the other consequences, though? I mean, Peter, maybe you can comment here, because you've said a lot about what he will try to do kind of under the table, if it's political meddling, if it's cyber warfare.
Yeah.
What are you expecting him to act on?
Andrea, you just said it. There's a wide arsenal of dirty tricks that Vladimir Putin has been willing to use in the past. That's meddling. He knows that the Western democracies are fragile. The American democracy is fragile. We are speaking as the hearing on the Congress riots, Capitol riots is happening right now. There's a good chance that a political figure in the U.S. will come back to power, who has said very negative things about NATO and has said complimentary things about Vladimir Putin. I don't want to get too political here when it comes to American policies, but there's a series of European democracies there are showing signs of strain, including when it comes to their support of Ukraine. And we're hearing increasing chatter in the halls of power, including in Washington, that there's a doubt that Ukraine will be able to beat back the Russians to the pre-February 24th borders. And so Vladimir Putin is calculating he's going to sit this out if and he's going to try to speed this process by cyber. You also mentioned cyber attacks on those democracies. Don't forget that Estonia, Baltic state, suffered about 10 years ago, suffered one of the largest such state-sponsored cyber attacks in the world's history. Essentially, Russia took off its entire internet for a certain period of time. So they've shown the capability, and we're sure going to see more of it.
Okay. Mark, very quickly, I could see you disagreed, if I'm not mistaken. You want to comment? Go ahead.
No, my only point would be I don't think Putin's goal is to take over Ukraine. He certainly understands he doesn't have the capability to take over Ukraine. I think we've got to accept that he is going to pull a Syria inside of Ukraine, which is make this go on so long. He can show the strategic patience. He doesn't have to answer to his people. So he's betting that Europe is going to need oil, the world is going to need wheat, and the publics are going to get impatient with this. So he's not playing this for the short game. He's playing this for the long game. That's how he thinks.
Okay. One obstacle this meeting faced was, of course, moderating between Ankara, Stockholm, and Helsinki. Tell us if all is now resolved and what will happen as a result of the agreement, these trilateral agreements that Sweden, Turkey, and Finland have come to. Will their promises be delivered on? Is this a finished issue?
Absolutely not. This is a very good start. Diplomatically, I think it's one of the biggest gains in the recent Turkish international diplomacy. But this is certainly just a start. Now, I think we should maybe can break this into three periods. Number one was exactly what this was, signing an MOU that is acceptable by all three sides, which is done. I think Turkey has gotten its keen issues on this document. Number two is we're going to have to wait and see what Finland and Sweden does in the next several months until the actual accession period, until the vote in the Turkish Assembly, Turkish Grand National Assembly, because Turkey will demand to see some concrete steps that are along the lines of what was signed. And then the third step is a longer-term step where we're going to wait and see in the coming years after that what Sweden and Finland do in regards to this very important issue of harboring terrorists within their borders and allowing them to harvest there. So it's in three parts. The first part is a great success. But we will have to see some concrete results until the final vote of accession is done by Turkish Grand National Assembly, and then as I said, there's a longer step after that. But it's a process. It was a great start, but that in no way or means it's over and done with. So we will have to see, and it's a process.
Okay, but what worries you going forward? I mean, and do you think Sweden and Finland are being genuine about their now understanding of Turkey's security concerns here?
What worries me going forward is number of cases the unkept promises of the West, of EU, of the US. I mean, I could tell you a number of cases, that never took place, and they just turned a blind eye to it. US did this. EU did this number of times, and these were not small issues. These were very life-threatening issues for Turkey. So going forward, that's what worries me. Whether Finland and Sweden were sincere about what they said and what they signed, I don't know. In international diplomacy, being sincere or being fair is really not in the actions. You have to be more pragmatic and actually wait and see what happens. But I think Turkey deserves to be extremely skeptical, even under a signature like this. And let's not forget, this MOU has been done under the auspices of NATO Secretary General, and in the final declaration, which was signed by all the heads of states. I think in article number 18, this MOU was referenced to. So in essence, NATO and all of its standing members have recognized this agreement. Whether or not Sweden, Finland, rest of NATO will live up to this, we'll see. I mean, technically, one could make the argument that the U.S. will actually stop its, health, its upbringing, its harboring of YPG, PYD after this, because they're now, indirectly a part of this agreement. But I don't think that's going to happen, at least not right now. But we'll see what Sweden and Finland do. It's really up to them.
Mark, can I get your insight on that? I mean, do you think Sweden and Finland have an incentive to honor this memorandum of understanding and what Turkey is expecting from it?
Well, I think what Finland and Sweden were trying to do is get into NATO. They are in NATO now, and so there won't be any direct incentive in the sense that somehow they could be kicked out of NATO if they don't live up to the obligations. But I think they do have a moral responsibility and a diplomatic responsibility to live up to the MOU.
Okay. Peter, are you on the same page there? And do you think it matters fundamentally to how NATO operates in that they honor agreements like this that are made and keep member solidarity as a priority?
Absolutely. Vladimir Putin has been, and that his main goal has been to try to splinter NATO, to splinter Western alliances, and obviously, keeping a member such as Turkey, which is playing an incredibly important role in the region. It's probably the only country that maintains good relations with both countries, Russia and Ukraine. It has sold Ukraine the wildly successful Bayraktar drones. I mean, keeping Turkey happy is of vital importance.
Okay. I want to go back because we just have a few minutes left. And Peter, I need to ask you about, Mark particularly saying that Putin is looking to play the long game. But you talked about how he is really considering what could happen in the relatively near future, particularly in the United States. If someone like Donald Trump comes back to power, who has expressed, his admiration for a man like Vladimir Putin, Putin can be as patient as he wants to. We've already called this, many have called it a war of attrition anyway in Ukraine. He can take tiny steps at a time as long as it lasts and his objectives remain the same. What do you really fear about the dynamic shifting, and particularly in U.S. leadership, and how it will affect NATO and Ukraine policy?
Well, it's the usual, fatigue syndrome. Any country, doesn't matter. It's a very simply human, trait to grow tired of conflicts and to have your attention kind of wander away. And then coupled with the crises that this, war has brought on, including the extremely high gas prices, which have hurt consumers, especially in the United States. A coming winter that everyone is dreading, considering what's going to be happening with gas deliveries to Europe. So Putin is waiting to see. He's hoping to wait them out. Obviously, weapons deliveries, they're also costing a lot of money, and some countries, are getting their stocks of weapons depleted as a result. And so that's what I refer to. There's already signals coming from America that, let's just slow down with weapons deliveries. Let's reach some kind of a detente with Russia. Maybe this is something Putin can live with, and this is very dangerous because, weapon disparities, Ukraine versus Russia is probably 1 to 10. To Russia's advantage, at the way this is going, Russia will continue this juggernaut, this onslaught, slowly but surely taking over more and more Ukraine's territory and causing a lot of humanitarian pain,
I'll tell you what,
economic pain.
Yeah, 40 seconds left. Mark, I want to get your final words.
Well, I think that the maneuverability of both sides at this point is over. I think what we're looking at, as you said, a battle of attrition. My view is we're probably going to look more like the Western Front of 1915 in a few weeks, as neither side is able to maneuver or move in significantly either to the east or west. and it's just going to settle into this artillery war we're seeing going on now.
Okay, Mark Kimmitt, I will have to give you the final word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for being with us. Onur Erim, Peter Zalmayev, thank you for participating on this program. And our viewers, of course, as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for much more. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.